So the portion from last week, we meet the first and third Friday, and so there are some portions that sometimes we miss, and so I'm going to recap last week because a lot went on. It was the whole story of the first book of Exodus, the beginning of Exodus, where Pharaoh proclaims to kill the male children by drowning them in the Nile. Moses' mother hides him, she gives birth to Moses, hides him for about 3 months until it was just too hard to hide him anymore. And then she builds a basket, places Moses in the basket, and puts him on that same Nile and lets him free. As luck or irony would have it, the same Pharaoh who told all the Jewish mothers to sacrifice their sons by drowning them in the Nile, that same Pharaoh's daughter happens to stumble upon the basket with Moses in it. And it just so happens that the daughter of the Pharaoh, one of her servants, is Moses' mother. So when she retrieves the baby, she knows that the baby needs to nurse, and it was actually Miriam, who was a little bit older, right, a little child, already living with the family, saying, well, my mother can nurse him. So Moses' mother was able to be nursed by his own mother. And then eventually when Moses was weaned, the Pharaoh's daughter officially adopts Moses. And Moses grows up as part of the Pharaoh's family. And then it goes on to the story where Moses sees an Egyptian soldier beating a Jewish slave and kills the Egyptian soldier and realizes he needs to flee. And then he gets married, there's the burning bush moment, and he's instructed by the Eternal One to go back to Egypt and free the Jews. That brings us to this Torah portion, Va'era. And this is the Passover portion. This is where we start dealing with the plagues. We get through 7 of the plagues in this Torah portion, which actually I thought was interesting because, why not include them all? Why have another Torah portion for the rest of the plagues? That'll be a workshop, I'm sure, in the future. In the meantime, this is the portion that starts off with Moses. There's kind of this dueling of who's got the more magical staff. The magician of the Pharaoh, he's able to, turn water into wine, and Moses well, I can make the Nile blood, and, well, I can make my staff a serpent. Well, I can make my staff a serpent. There was this whole whose staff is better and bigger, and we won't go into that. But anyway, he starts to inform the Pharaoh that if you don't let the Jews go, there will be plagues. God will cast plagues upon the land. And so we start going through all of the plagues. And each time, the Pharaoh starts to think, oh, maybe I should let these Jews go. And then the Pharaoh's heart hardens again. So then there's another plague. And the Pharaoh comes close, but then he changes his mind, and his heart hardens again. And what's interesting is that the Torah says, and God hardens the heart of Pharaoh. Seems a little counterintuitive. But again, this is mythology, this is symbolism, and you have to think about what are the characters symbolizing what's going on, what kind of internal struggle is going on in our own being. Which I feel this Torah portion happening at the beginning of the Gregorian calendar year, which we traditionally celebrate, it is about that intention that we set for the new year, those goals that we set. Okay, 2019, this year, I'm going to drop those 20 pounds. I'm going to start drinking more water. I'm going to start meditating an hour every day. I'm going to take that 30-minute walk around Green Lake, or an hour, or however long it takes. And you start setting these expectations for yourself, okay? Nothing wrong with that. But then that inner critic, who I call Critical Kirk, that's my inner critic. The minute that you go off target, or sin, right, the archery term, you miss the target, what do we start to do? We start beating ourselves up, right? I can't even make it through one day without having a drink, or without, indulging in carbs, or fill in the blank, right? We start beating ourselves up. And that's why some people, when they set those intentions, they fall off the wagon. They are unable to fulfill them. They beat themselves up. Well, I already screwed up, so I'm just going to screw up the rest of the week, right? Each time we start to open our heart to that possibility of being set free, something happens when we shut ourselves back down. Nope, can't do this. Nope, can't do it. Okay, I'm lousy at this. No, critical Kirk, or whatever name of that critical voice that is going on with inside your head. Then maybe we'll try another time, and then maybe we don't live up to our expectations. Boom, 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 boom. We start beating ourselves up again. And we go through this cycle, and we go through this cycle. We are in our own enslavement. We are stuck in our own Egypt as we try to set these intentions for ourselves. But one way that I like to look at it, we put a lot of focus on January 1st, beginning of the new year. I always see every day as the beginning of a new year, right? Today is the first day of the new year, and tomorrow will be the first day of that new year. It's an ongoing cycle, and it's an ongoing shift moving forward. All right, so you had that extra donut that you weren't supposed to have. Tomorrow's a new year. Reset that intention. Give critical Kirk, the donut, and let him be busy on his own, and you set your intention. Otherwise, you continue to force these plagues upon yourself, and you can't truly be free. Be kind to yourself. If you've missed the mark, pull up the arrow again and try again, because tomorrow is the first day of the new year. It's about self-compassion. It's about self-patience. And it's about being enoughness. How many times do we self-sabotage because we say, I'm not smart enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not young enough, I'm not old enough, I'm not worthy enough. But we have to remind ourselves that we are enough. I confess that I have a syndrome called the imposter syndrome. Some of you may have heard of it. I have it down to a science. The imposter syndrome is where you feel that you're basically faking everybody out, that you really have no idea what you're doing, and eventually everybody else is going to figure that out. That you are really an imposter and have no idea and no business doing what you're doing, whatever that may be. I was full-time in radio for about 20 years. It probably took 5 or 6 years before I really could say, wow, I really am this job that I was doing. I wasn't faking it, and I wasn't going to be caught as an imposter. Now, of course, we're always learning the same lessons over and over, and I'm stepping into a new field of music therapy. I can't tell you how many times that imposter syndrome voice, that critical Kirk in me is saying, they can play piano better than you, they can play guitar better than you. Oh, that was an amazing intervention. I'm never going to be that good. Just forget it, right? Does anybody relate to this? Imposter syndrome? That self-sabotage, that I'm not good enough, right? That's the plagues that we continue to put upon ourselves. So I like to play the game. It's not really a game, but I like to play the reframing called what if? What if I was enough? I don't have to have been a pianist and performed at Carnegie Hall to be enough for whatever is needed in this moment. Maybe I am enough. Maybe I'm not going to do an Ironman triathlon, but maybe I am going to be able to walk Green Lake without having to stop and take a rest sometime in the next month. Maybe that is enough. Set the intention and make it relative to you. Try to release that imposter syndrome voice in your mind that you're not good enough or smart enough or pretty enough or whatever enough it may be. Because otherwise, you're just imposing more and more plagues upon your being, and you can never be free from Mitzrayim. So I think this particular Torah portion is especially timely. And one of the tools you can use in setting that Kavanah, in setting that intention, whatever it may be, is the mindfulness practice. Outside of the yoga cushion and the Om moment, right? It's the mindfulness of what is the first couple of thoughts that enter your mind when you wake up in the morning. I confess, I have a challenge of grabbing for that phone and checking email and checking texts, right? I remember Oprah Winfrey, in one of her interviews, was saying she stays away from any of that for at least the first half hour. She gets up, she takes a deep breath, she makes herself a cup of tea, because all those emails and texts are going to be there. Now, this is a practice. The reason it's a practice is because you have to practice, right? Otherwise, it would be a mindfulness, got it, first try. But this is a mindfulness practice, because we have to practice. People who have been doing it 30 years are still practicing, okay? So however this mindfulness practice may look for you in your daily routine, washing the dishes, flossing your teeth, eating a bowl of cereal, driving in the car. Now, I'm not saying to zone out, and go into some altered state of consciousness while you're driving to work. But as you're driving that same route, notice the tree that's been there every single time, and you just never saw it before. Notice the building. Notice the different colors that are there every single time, but you haven't noticed it before. How many times do you get from point A to point B in the car, and then all of a sudden you're there and you're like, wow, and you were completely unconscious the whole time, and you're just there. So that's just another opportunity for you to be mindful, not distracted, not zoned out, don't go into Zen mode in the car, but just open your eyes and see what's there every single day. When you're in the grocery store, just notice the colors of the fruit. Notice the different designs of the cereal boxes, right? Notice the sound that the cart makes as you're putting items. This all sounds so mundane, but that's the practice. And when you are able to be in a more mindful state of existence, you may find that you're more kind to yourself. You may find that you're not having to worry about being blank enough. You may find that there's more self-patience, self-confidence, self-assurance that who you are is enough. You may find as you set those intentions for 2019, even if you sin and miss the mark, okay, I'll drink those 8 glasses of water tomorrow. Okay, I drank 4. Okay, that's enough. To be gentler with yourself, set those intentions as you move into the new year. And don't forget, tomorrow's New Year's Day as well. I want to close, it's just ironic how these things happen. So before I even knew I was giving the talk tonight, I was driving home from doing an errand. And some businesses, they have that marquee, we'll talk about things that are on sale, but sometimes they have a little inspirational thought. Have you ever seen that? I know Dunn Lumber does that every once in a while. And so I saw one of those today as I was driving home from an errand, and it's this business on the corner not far from where we live called R&R Rentals, where you can rent like a little mini tractor, or you can rent, kind of heavier tools that you wouldn't necessarily want to buy yourself. And there on the marquee, it said, one day or day one, your choice.